What's going on, Soul Tribe? And welcome to Alchemist Astrology. Justin here, and are you ready to get into those lunar shenanigans? Because it ends nice. No, it's not that bad. But there is a little bit of a tricky pocket there when the moon enters into Virgo. Thankfully, Venus and Big Papa are there to kind of add a little bit of support there. But it'll be an interesting energy to kind of navigate, and we're gonna get through this together, and it's gonna be fantastic. But if you're new here, again, my name is Justin, and one of the things that I do in this channel is talk about the astrology of the moon, and that just goes into what sign the moon's in, what phase it's in, when it happens to go void of course. And I was just looking at that, and that's going to be moon's going to be busy towards the end of December, going into January. It's crazy, all that stuff. But it's just to get an understanding and a feel of the moon as it has a different conversations with the celestial bodies and distributes that energy. The moon's special, how it orbits us. So love that good old moon. But yeah, before we jump into this thing here, if you want to support the work that I'm doing further, I have a Patreon page. And it has two tiers. One of them gives you access to the Lucky Day podcast, where I talk about the auspicious elections for each month. And now you guys going to be good to know about that void of course. So I'll definitely talk about that. But I talk about the auspicious days for the months to launch any sort of endeavors that you're wanting to do. And then the second tier comes with the podcast plus a personalized monthly report from me. And who doesn't want that? So if that's something that you want to check out, there's a link in the description box below for that. So definitely check that out. But let's go ahead and get into this thing here, because I'm going to be covering the week of November 11th through the 17th, 2025. And let's go ahead and get into this thing, because we're ending off, I think, on a nice note. Just because Venus is kind of in the mix there, we're gonna take some of that Venusian energy with us. But on a Tuesday, the 11th of November, the moon's in Leo. And we're getting to that last quarter phase. The moon's just kind of hanging out there. And the moon's going to have that last quarter. And that's when the moon is squaring the sun. If you're watching the video version, I have a chart up here. It's going to happen at about 9:28 p.m. Pacific time. And it's going to happen at about 20 degrees and 4 minutes. The moon's at Leo. The sun is in Scorpio. And when you're just thinking about that, just on a personal level, the sun is that soul kind of or can represent that kind of internal light, the fire of the mind, where the moon is the container of that, the thing that reflects that light, the body, very closely associated with that. And when you're thinking about the square aspects, that's when the celestial bodies are 90 degrees apart, as you can see on the sign here. So this is going to be, especially if you have any points around this placement, around about 20 degrees, the late degrees of the fixed signs. That's Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Taurus. Then this one may be working a little more personally with you. But the squares can be a bit of tension. They can bring a bit there. They're not as harmonious as a sextile or a trine is. But then when we're thinking about the sun and the moon, this could be maybe feeling some kind of internal rumbling, just kind of feeling off. Like maybe there's something that you're wanting to change in your finances, maybe something in your relationship, something in your home space, something in your city space. Just thinking about the things of the moon, maybe wanting to travel more, whatever that's looking like. But there could be some kind of change that's, in order to maybe make that happen, something is needed to get let go. Maybe you're wanting to improve your health, but that would mean you'd have to, have to cook differently, change the diet up there. And I bring up that idea of letting go because the moon is in that waning side, of the lunar cycle. And the moon really does support the kind of the demolition and the removal of things. When the moon is waning, it's easier to make space to declutter. I think the last quarter is a really kind of good aspect from that. It's been a busy lunar month, that we've all been kind of experienced there. And it's a great time to just kind of clean up, to kind of check the, to just get things back in some kind of order here. And I think it's going to be nice, considering where the moon's getting ready to move. But, this is an interesting day too, because one, if you're watching this, Mars and Mercury are just about within a degree. Mercury just stationed retrograde, and how y'all feeling? It's been a lot of stuff that's been going on here. I had a feeling this Mars Mercury conjunction was going to be a very interesting one, the second time around. But that energy is almost at its exact point, and so that those energies are still kind of building up there. And just at the same time, Jupiter has just stationed retrograde today, and so there's still, there's a lot of energies that are building, and then all these retrogrades are going to build up to that that second conjunction with Mars and Mercury. So this is a bit of a tense week that we're kind of navigating through, but we're getting towards the tail end of it, which is really nice. But there are some things that we're going to have to kind of, especially with Jupiter retrograding, that we're going to have to reevaluate there. And I talk about that more kind of in the monthly reading, so definitely check that out. But let's go ahead and get into the next day here, because we get into Wednesday, the 12th of November. And the moon is going to, no aspects that the moon's going to be completing today, but the moon is going to move into Virgo at about 3:51 p.m. Pacific time. Now, this is a really great time to, especially when the moon enters into, or any celestial body moves into a new sign, to get the lay of the land, to understand what's coming up, because it's not just when the moon is making these exact aspects that things are happening, or when any sort of celestial body is coming up on your transits. It's that applying, that energy that's building up to those things. So this would be one, and this is a great time when we're talking to analyze this. With the moon in Virgo, let's talk about that for a moment. Virgo is ruled by Mercury, who's now is in not in the best shape right now, and is the mutable earth sign, and they're one of the nocturnal signs. So there's this receptive quality to Virgo. And Virgo has that ability, just on a base level, to be able to take in those kind of earthly surroundings, to analyze the things, to see the problems, okay, and what needs to be fixed. What do I need to change, that mutable nature of Virgo, in order to make this better, to make this more efficient, to make this make money for me, to make this do whatever you need the thing to do for you there. That's a Virgo for energy for me, is a really great energy for refinement, and this would be one where, especially if you have any points around the mutable signs, it's going to be Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, and Gemini. These transits may be working more personally with you, and pay attention to what you have in those signs. Because this is one where Virgo's not a particularly busy one for me, but it does square my moon. My moon's active. My 11th house is activated as an annual perfecture. So yeah, those they hit. But this is something where the nice thing about the moon, you're thinking about this time of the moon in Virgo. Here's what's coming. First, there's a big hug that's waiting on the other side with Venus, but it has to come through this kind of Mars-Mercury storm here, whatever this little trickery is going on here. And that is something to keep in mind. There's going to be kind of a mixed bag here, because it's nice that, we'll get, the Mars stuff isn't nice, but with that square, but then at least there's going to be Venus directly on the other side of it, providing some sort of support in whatever that looks like. But then the moon later is going to be opposing Saturn. It's going to get a little gift from Jupiter that's going to help it get through whatever long-term things, maybe that's delays or hindrances that Saturn may be bringing up. But again, Jupiter is not where Jupiter's always going to give. With the retrograde, there may be a bit of a delay with the beneficence of Jupiter. It's not as strong as when it's going direct and moving fast, exalted in Cancer, where just Big Papa's like, yeah, I got gifts. Now it's just like, yeah, I got gifts, but now it's really like Santa. We got a web. Now that we're literally waiting a year, but it's going to be retrograde a couple of months or a few months. But still, you can feel that when that support, when that regular support that was there, is all of a sudden gone or has been reduced in some kind of way, that does have these kind of long-term implications. And let's go ahead and get into this. On Thursday, the 13th of November, we get to, moon still waning, and the first thing it's going to do is form that square with that Mercury retrograde. And, we're still kind of, again, now Mercury's moved out of that 6-degree range. It's still within 3 degrees of Mars, but now it's at least getting away from Mars. There's the dust is starting to settle there. But that still doesn't mean that the moon still doesn't have problems to me, immediate things dynamics to deal with when we're talking about that moon squaring Mars. This could be a very active time just in the collective. The moon is very representative, represents the people, the gathering of the masses. And so whatever this news, this thing that Mercury is bringing, that these retrogrades have been showing up, there's going to be an action that's going to need to be taken, and it may not be the best. It may feel like there's some kind of something that's forcing your hand in a sense, and no one likes to feel that idea of where you have to make a decision because you have to, because you don't get really a time to plan things out. Mars energy does that, can feel forceful, can feel rushed, can feel sudden, you know what I mean? But then we get to the other side with Venus. Because then Moon's going to sextile Venus, and that's really nice. That's when the celestial bodies are, and I have this actually on the chart here. There's going to happen at about 8 degrees 24 minutes, just a little FYI, but it's when the celestial bodies are about 60 degrees apart from one another, and it's not as beneficial as the trine, where that's the most beneficial aspect, but it's the next best thing. Requires a bit of initiative with that, but it can create these opportunities. Not anything, the sextiles are nothing to sleep on. They still can create that energy of ease. It reminds me of, I've mentioned all this. I grew up, with my mom and I would always go volunteering, and that's something that that I still like to do try to make time for. And that's something where with everything, and I get these, on top of doing that, I get these sort of like monthly kind of emails. And, there has been a lot, just thinking about with just like the thing that's happening with SNAP right now, that has impacted a lot of people. But, and I was talking with my husband about this, and thinking about how, there's it sucks, that what's happened here. But if we're going to find some good, that Venus sextile there, the nice thing that when I was reading through that email, that kind of it laid out the Mars news, the kind of the harsh things, how it's things have doubled since with all of this is happening, how we've had to serve, but also the people who are willing to devote their time to create that sense of balance, that doesn't want people to just still wants there to be some sense of camaraderie, togetherness, and things. That's the beauty of Venus. It can spur up an action like that. Mars things doesn't just the action may have been something that was terrible, but it can create some really kind of loveliness in this, and it can create this sense of community, and I think that's really important with the moon. And I think that that's something, where there can be, finding beauty in the chaos. I think that can be a really lovely thing, that the benefics can be, and even see where when you have these sort of mixed pockets, that there's some tough things that are happening, but again, let's not forget the nice things that are at least trying to grow from that are trying to still support that. Just maybe with that Mercury kind of moon squaring Mercury, is just like, how do I adjust to this new sort of dynamic? So that could be just something that could be coming up with this energy, just something to think about. But then we get into the 14th of November. That's going to be a Friday, at least here. And then the moon is in Virgo. We're still waning, and the moon sextiles the sun. And that's, I think, a really nice aspect too, because there's this chance to, because if there are feelings around, and that's not just with what's going on, depending on where you're at in the world, whatever that's going on, there could be that sense of some sort of like an opportunity to like, this is how I'm going to embrace the day. This is how I'm going to, there are things that are going on externally, yes, around me, and I still have to get other things. I still have to take care of, even just on a base level, take care of the body, get its needs, figure out how I'm getting those things together, find that moon stuff, that shelter, that those people, the family, whatever that looks like, How do I prepare? The moon can be wanderings and ships and things like that. So it's like, maybe maybe there needs to be a relocation. It just depends on what's going on. I think that the moon sextiling the sun can be an opportunity to, if you've been feeling that change, if you've been feeling that pressure to step into that authority, to step into your light, to change whatever you want to see changed, if that makes sense, because then the moon is going to sextile that the Jupiter that's, freshly retrograde. And this is a new, now that this is it's been a minute since the moon has talked with Jupiter like this in the in this kind of sex, with it being in retrograde, and so now it's maybe it's still overcoming, which I like about that. There's still resources there, but it just doesn't feel as, it's like having again to require on other people's resources as opposed to one's own resources, where that can feel a bit uncomfortable. At least it's still an option. I think that that's something too. And it's just, I'm using this analogy just because this is just what one example that I can call on in my world. But there's the moon is up, last thing, the moon is opposing Saturn, on this day, is completing that aspect. And I actually have that here on the chart. Happens at about 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. And this happens at about 25 degrees and 18 minutes. Moon's at Virgo, Saturn's in Pisces. And whatever these things that have been kind of riling up and kind of coming up here with this kind of Mars stuff has had some very kind of long-term implications there that we're going to need to figure out how to move through. Saturn's those things that can feel, kind of chronic, and they can feel like a long time. And who knows how long this where this situation may last, but there is an end to it, where there is another side to this thing. It just depends on how again, but not just depends, but sometimes, you look at how the charts line up sometimes, and it's just like you're sort of just taking the good with the challenging sometimes, and I think that there's that, there may be some wrestling with that, and I don't think it's meant to be where we stay in a rut. Take them some time to kind of contemplate those things. Jupiter's a very spiritual planet, and I think in this, with Jupiter going back in the sky, kind of retracing its steps, this can be a time of just thinking about, just where you're at with your beliefs, where you're at with your faith, and whatever that means for you. It's that all kind of encompassing kind of spirituality that Jupiter embodies. So there could be some new revelations, some learning some new things about yourself that can come up with there. Some things that might surprise you, where you maybe can deliver in a way and create something more than that you thought you could, have a bigger impact. How maybe looking at how this kind of small things can have those kind of big long-term impacts as well. We don't have to look at just the negative things of Saturn. It's in that waiting, in that patience, what are we doing in that time? Okay, we got these constraints, we have these restrictions, but we got to keep moving, and that's where, I think that growth happens. So that's something to think about. Then we get to the 15th of November, and the moon's going to move into Libra pretty early. And this would be one where I got this on the somewhere. I got this somewhere on the chart. Where's Libra? But the moon's going to enter into Libra at about 1:43 a.m. Pacific time. And this is nice because, the moon is in the sign of a benefic now and in the sign of Venus. And Libra is the cardinal air sign, and they're one of the diurnal signs, so they're active in nature. And I like that there's this kind of day, but it's a bit of a neutral day just because Mars is still kind of in the mix there. It's a more harmonious aspect, which is nice. There can be more of the constructive qualities maybe coming out of this, but it's still presenting maybe a bit of irritation, some challenges and things like that. But the moon starts, or let me backtrack. When we're thinking about Libra, one, you want to check to see if you got got a lot of cardinal placements. That's Libra, Capricorn, Aries, or Cancer. The moon's going to be working more personally with you. But Libra, they're the cardinal air sign, the initiators of thought, and I think Libra is one that, this is a time where it's like, there may be, I'm getting like just kind of this mixed energies where it's like I'm thinking about that, how Libra can be said to be indecisive, but I think it's more so just Libra is one that really weighs its options carefully, because where you initiate from that is going to have implications, consequences, whatever that may mean. And I think Libra just in general wants to make sure that it's creating balance. It doesn't want to misstep. It doesn't want to tip the scales too much in one way. Keep things neutral, keep things balanced, keep it harmonious. There's a lot of pressures with that when you think about this Libra energy. But I think with the moon sextiling Mercury, this could be feeling a bit more adjusted to the pace now, because Mercury is now starting to move. Even though it's retracing its steps, it's in retrograde, it's still starting to pick back up some speed a little bit. So this could be settling into, this, we're not in this Mercury retrograde for long, but while we're in this for the pretty much the rest of the month, while we're navigating this space, this could be just kind of, reorienting oneself into this. And now then when the moon sextiles Mars, it's like, okay, now I know how to better to move. Now I know how to better to take action. I can feel these more, the instincts are feeling more, less on like maybe survival mode and more on a more regulated type of space here. That could be how a moon kind of sextiling Mars can feel, and that's nice, when you can go from feeling like it's crazy frazzled to like slightly frazzled. It's still frazzled, but it's in a more controlled degree, and that's, it's manageable, and we like that. The moon likes manageable, especially in Libra. So I think that this can be a great one for, especially even like air sign energy, talking about some things, talking about the challenges, seeing how other people have been navigating this space. How are you doing? That can be, sometimes that can lead to some good days. We get to Sunday. The moon's not completing any aspects yet. I got it set towards the end of the day on Sunday here. But the moon's real close to Jupiter, getting up there. And that's, again, we're looking at what's to come. Yes, there was some things, some actions, some thoughts, we've been thinking about, maybe talking about some things. And now we're deciding how to move. But there's a high five from Jupiter at the other side of this day, and so this can be a great time to, again, with that, Jupiter can bring, when we think about the alliances of great people that Big Papa can bring, I don't think it's just like, thinking about people who maybe have a lot of just like things. This could be someone who has just a lot of like kindness, who has the time to, and wants to hear what's been going on with you. This is a friend. Those are usually great people, usually, the ones that we choose to stick this duration out, to be on a journey with, and to have them be on our journey with us. And, the kind of nice thing I like about this, as this energy is building up here, the sun's actually not just separating from that, but the lights were just, the sun just separated from that, actually. Let's talk about that. It's just separated from Jupiter. And so there's something internally that maybe is feeling the changes. And then the moon, the lights, the sun and the moon were, closely associated with like the eyes, the left eye and the right eye. And, that can be able to see things a bit more clearly, as we're moving kind of into the 16th here, as a kind of just wrapping up this Sunday, having a faith that things, as tumultuous as at that whatever level that may be, like, again, it can assuage, it can wane, because then we get to the last day here, Monday, the 17th of November, and before the moon moves into Scorpio, the moon's going to again have that square with Big Papa, and now it's just, and this could be, maybe even like a challenge, maybe of faith, it could be a needing to, where you're believing in just a different type of thing, and that's not always a bad thing. It's the idea that we change. We don't ever stay. There's always a baseline that's consistent, but then there are things. It's like a city. I'm looking at some places that are closing out, and actually at the same time some places are opening up, and it's interesting to navigate that space over time, to see how things, to have that sort of reference points, to and even notice that in oneself, how just like the body changes, and things like that, as you start to get along in this experience, and things from how it moves, from just how things grow, and just all of those different things, the different care that the body needs as it evolves. And I think that the square, again, where it can be a bit tense, it's with Jupiter, and it's leading to that sense of what I would hope would be just kind of the appreciation for the abundance that this life does have to offer. Again, it has its challenges, but it has its beauty that's happening too. And I think that it's just sometimes in just, depending on how the alignments can be, that can be depending on how that's being seen. Because, where there's one thing that's happening in one area where it can be very challenging, very, very awful. There could be other things on the side that are very, very great, very beautiful. And that's always an interesting interesting dichotomy, I think, of this experience, and it can get to asking those sort of like kind of Jupiterian philosophical sort of questions and things. And I think that could be, one of ways to kind of go into as the moon moves into Scorpio, because then that's going to happen at about 1:44 p.m. Pacific time. Now, this is the sign where the moon is in its fall, and when it's, or in its depression. And when a celestial body is in that, it just feels lowered in a sense. It is not, the moon is not, the moon can't do anything, but there's an intensity with the feelings of Scorpio. It's different than Cancer. The moon's just used to going through the feelings, whereas opposed to Scorpio, it has to maybe the Scorpion has to excrete that poison to get that water moving. And it's finding ways, I think, healthy ways to channel that emotional energy. Because when you talk about Scorpio is traditionally ruled by Mars, and they're the fixed water sign, and they're one of the nocturnal signs, so the more receptive sign. When you think about even like the function of Mars is that idea of like excreting things, whether it be through, kind of like we're thinking about the bowels and going to the bathroom. And, it's, if you hold that water in, it's very uncomfortable. And then that's where I think the moon has a hard time, because if we're looking at some of the things that maybe we're holding on to, and not accepting the things that are, or not just accepting, but just like having a hard time maybe dealing with the changes. One example, and I think that I can go ahead and switch over. One example that I'm, personally thinking about, and this is way kind of long term, but my parents' place was a place that's always been I've always felt was very peaceful. They kind of live out just outside in the boondocks a little bit, just nice, close enough to the city in our town, but far enough to where they have some nice. It's nice, it's got a little forested area. There's this company or something that's it's whatever, and they like to do loud things, martial things where there, and I'm just whether it be crazy fireworks or revving it up down the road. And it's I got some strong feelings about that. It's just like things changed. They're neighbors. There's some things with that have changed. And sometimes, I think the moon, when you think about the moon dealing with like our possessions, our home, those things that are personal to us, even like our family and things, the people change, and sometimes that can be hard to adjust to sometimes, to when people are going through different belief changes, through different things, and holding that space, But I think when we find those ways to move through those emotions, to accept these things that have changed, then we liberate ourselves in a sense. There's that the Jupiterian energy, the relief from bonds, the release from bad things. And we can mourn something, but also welcome in something like, okay, this is just how things are going to have to move going forward, and I think I think with Moon and Scorpio, I think if there's ever a time where the emotions are, having troubles moving through them, working with the body, I find eating bitter things can be really nice. Dark chocolate, you get yourself a dark chocolate bar, one that'll last you a long time because no one likes to eat that like that. Well, I won't say no one, but it helps make things easier to swallow, and it's just like, oof, now that I got through that. Or even maybe even some spicy things, or I even just think like moving the body, whether it be, if you're holding like anger, get like a punching bag, go sign up for a gym, sign up for a class, go for a run, sweat, like that's that's another kind of, I think, another martial things. Because like, even in this last little bit, but even just thinking about Mars and that sort of, maleficent sort of thing, it really, I think, represents that it's, when we're sweating, when we're going to the bathroom, it's removing toxins from the body. Because if that didn't move, then living in this body would be awful. It wouldn't be the greatest. So that's where the malefics can be constructive. That's where, even when we're working with celestial bodies in their signs of that are trickier for them, there still can be support in that. Because even just looking at that, let's go back to there real quick. I thought I was done with that. But the moon, if we're looking at the lay of the land, it's got a trine with Saturn that's going to happen, but at least it's a trine with Saturn, and Saturn's not overcoming the moon. So this is the moon feeling more in control of those kind of long-term aspects. And we'll talk about that more when we get into that. But just as a base level, the moon's getting ready to come up on a new moon here soon. Mercury's going to be actually really close with that. Venus is co-present there, so trying to bring some harmony. Jupiter's overcoming the moon, trying to bring some support there. So that's why I said this week kind of ends off kind of nice, even though the moon's going to get into what normally would be kind of tricky waters for it. It at least has some kind of support there, some kind of something to get it through to this. Even if it's got to feel through something maybe a little more uncomfortable, than the moon would like to experience, whether it be as an individual or as a family unit or as a collective. So yeah, just some things I think to think about with these lunar shenanigans. You can get deep with that moon. But if you down in the comment section, let us know how you're navigating these energies, and I think that and and I think too, when I think about the moon and like the relating to more of the kind of the material aspects of life, what are we doing with our fortune? Just like what are some resources that are out there? I think that look into like your local food banks and even just like kind of volunteering for that stuff if you feel compelled to do that. I just, again, it's just something that I've known that sense of community group. I have the moon in the 11th house, so that's always been something that's really kind of nice. I do kind of like being in that sort of environment, that sort of social aspect. It gets me a chance to just like sun, the Leo personality, Jupiter energy all about. So, and I got Mercury squared the midheaven and things. So, I'm just like, yeah, I get to talk in and whatnot. So it's nice. You can help some people. So, finding that sort of thing, how you're getting through that with those days, because I think it can be easy to just get kind of caught up in just the challenges in life. And I think that it is showing that there are other things that are happening simultaneously, and sometimes it's that I think those things can get drowned out sometimes. But yeah, comment, and then if that's something where you want to navigate these energies, see how they're showing up more personally in your chart, down in the description box there's a link to book a consultation with me, so that's always available for you as well. And if you just want to get and if you have any questions, my email's down there as well, so definitely feel free to reach out to me. And if you want to see what's just going on in the monthly, because like I said, these ones, the moon just deals with them just kind of going through things weekly. But if you want to get a more deep dive as to far as the movement of each month of the sun and the other planets, then there's a link for Celestial News Monthly. And yeah, it's just that. It talks about the transits of them, what signs are going to be most affected, and how to most practically work with those energies, how to navigate through those spaces there. So that is there for you. But I think that's all I have for you. So until next time, stay mindful out there. Keep eyes on that moon. Love that moon. Got to see the moon actually the other day. The moon and Big Papa were out. I think I was talking about that in one of the episodes there. But yeah, they were both out there, and that was nice. And it can be nice, especially over here where it gets kind of cloudy sometimes. It's nice when you got those clear nights to see. Man, there was a bunch of stars that were out. So get out there and connect with that sky. And I will catch you on the next one. Later.